Keynote. I'm just going to set my little bits of paper up. Check, check. Is that good? Yeah. If it weren't for the stars, the night sky might finally be brave enough to snuff out the moon and lay down with the earth. And we would plunge into an embrace of darkness. Light would wither like hope in a prison of war, fade like a ridiculed idea, dilute like yellow paintbrush tips under running water. Van Gogh, Starry Night, a canvas without wonder. Black strokes dead of inspiration, swirling like spiritless pirouettes, perfectly executed yet lifeless. Without them, without the stars, we are but children sending prayers into the cosmos, surrendered to suspend unanswered and still. Even when man evolves to light up the night sky with invention, still our reach is restricted by our comprehension. The stars, their beauty, have always let us believe beyond. They relinquish our grasp and exceed the fathomable, as if to look through them was to climb an upward manhole into an infinite bliss. We navigate constellations to find this. We navigate words and history to redefine myth as unquestionable legend, to enjoy the sun without ropes, to fashion star-shaped hopes that poke through the canopy and allow ambition to elope with fruition. Matariki is upon us, or was upon us. And we again marvel as myth becomes adamant that science can be defied tonight. As these handmade kites travel higher than any rocket or satellite ever has, we risk the impossible. Like a sun splashing his tears on the other side of closed doors in rooms that argue and argue and argue like twinkling beacons of hope. We celebrate and inhabit the space between eternal lovers like a newborn clutched between its parents. Papatuanuku Earth Mother, Anginui Sky Father. Today, let us karakia into the mouth of Tawhiri Mātia so that he might breathe our gratitude into the wind, enriching our connection. Today, let us all be still lives of introspection, strong like the branches of Tani Mahuta, whose trunk stretches into the heavens, bearing the weight of godly heartache for us. Today and tonight, children's dreams will pour outside the galaxy, carried like hemoglobin on a silver lining to the hearts of those of us who forget that the world isn't black yet. Colour races like shooting stars collecting windows of imagination for the ignorant and complacent races like the unsettled minds that have spent too long stargazing. They've overlooked that the hard, the hard, will always supersede the stars for inspiration. For there you will find the brightest of all earthly creation. There is that familiar warming sensation of oneness, there cradled inside the fabric of space and time. Just like the stars, we shine. So a good story will invoke all six ears to listen. The knowing ears of the puku, the feeling ears of the heart, and the questioning ears of the mind. This is a concept I picked up during my time on a writer's residency in Banff, Alberta, on the Turtle Island of Canada. It speaks to our sensory comprehension of story, the emotion of sound, and the persuasion of words, and the power of speaking out loud. It speaks to this dynamic between us, to its potential. How much of this talk will you take in? Will you allow yourself to tune and challenge the ideas I put forth in your mind? Will you embrace them with certainty in the hungry belly of wisdom? Will you feel them deeply and be moved as they tremble over the bicuspid ears of your heart? Or will you navigate all three, and in doing so, expand a little faster? I began with a poem about Matariki, the vast cosmic expanse and how it connects with us. I use this poem much like a karakia, to prepare myself for unity thinking, to incite courage as I move through vulnerable conversation. And I offer this poem as a request that today you open and tune into all six channels of listening. If my journey into writing poetry, competing in Poetry Slam, performing spoken word, and now exploring Indigenous storytelling has taught me anything, is that story doesn't happen without you. Ko taupiri te maunga. You see, I'm not alone. I got my tipuna that got me through until I'm older. Power of Waikato. Life source of the chiefs on a tani wha beast full of love and peace. You can catch me on a bend, but you won't find me in a creek unless my ancestors put me there to speak where it's murky. Unless my ancestors put me there to speak where it's murky. What's dirty needs clarity until we see all people like family. What's dirty needs clarity until we see all people like family. Now back to whakapapa through space and time is up. Paddle my star waka 49. This divine buoy, a coup of your mind from time, Louis. Change your frame, switch your lane. Our minds and my doing. Woo. Now I'm a D-block kid from Make City, raised on the nitty and gritty of hard living, but I had to grow as a man to start digging. In the garden of growth, it's God's kitchen. Listen, out there on a Nadia limb, I found better living. Sorry. Until I grew a garden that fit my description. Something a little more respectable, full of fruit, flowers, and yummy as vegetables. Now let me colour your plate, boom festival. I'm no professional, but I'm dependable. I keep the palette clean and the brush stroke never weak, in case my ancestors need me to speak where it's murky. In case my ancestors need me to speak where it's murky. What's dirty needs clarity until we see all people like family. Feel free to say it. What's dirty needs clarity until we see all people like family. What's dirty needs clarity until we see all people like family. That's pretty quiet. What's dirty needs clarity until we see all people like family. Perhaps that's the real nature of a family tree. Kia ora koutou. Katoa. My name is Michael Moore. I'm a spoken word artist and a creative developer for Creative Waikato. And I also am the National Director for New Zealand Poetry Slam. I'm currently on break, but most importantly, I'm a father to two incredible young daughters. Sienna, who is 11, and Asha, who is 7. And they teach me everything I never knew about being a man and a dad. If you didn't catch it in my lucid pepe heart, I'm a huge believer of owning your own brand of intelligence. Many of the things I've grown to believe in, I draw from pure hood learnings. From growing up tough and learning to survive. I used to look at my skill set as if it weren't valuable, as if street smarts and resilience couldn't possibly stack up to societal success. And though it took a lot of writing and a maturing into culture, not only for myself but for our country, when I could finally reflect my life against Indigenous intelligence, my puku, my stomach whispered sweetly like, yes, there is a place for you here in this world. But the reality of my life had imploded. The world was transforming before my eyes, and it was writing and sharing stories that helped me to navigate this new world. Joy Harjo, the first Native American poet to receive Poet Laureate in the United States, says that all things are made of stories, of song, of music or vibration. All living things hum or illuminate. And if we take a step back, we may see our connection to it. This first part is called scope. So while in Canada, I was very fortunate to meet local Cree elders named Jerry Saddleback and Joanne Saddleback, along with a bunch of other storytellers from around the world. And on the first day of our Indigenous Writers Residency, we were sitting in our class and we smudged. We used sage, wheatgrass, and a golden eagle feather to allow smoke to permeate through us. And we buried tobacco in the snow as an offering to the land. We were surrounded by a powerful mountain range known as the Sleeping Buffalo. The Satina and Stony Creek people that I met talked about this mountain as a chiefly burial place and a place where First Nation people would go for vision quests. So we're in the classroom, speaking with these beaming elders, the mountain in the window just staring through with its hazy purple eyes. And before I knew it, the whole group fell into a saturating vulnerability. We were completely open. And in that moment, I realized that I was the only man in this group of residency recipients. And while I was turning that thought over, Joanne Saddleback looks at me and raises her finger. And she says, if this is life, and I'm a woman, and you're a man, what do you see? And I said, well, I see this side of the finger. And she said, perfect, because I see this side of the finger. And then she began to dig into different identities and deepen her corridor into different identities and also genders. She spoke about gender not as a physical assignment, but rather as how the spirit moves. She began to describe other identifiable ways of being, the clown spirit known as the contrary, the balanced vessels of the two-spirited, the insightful self-healing asexual, the man, the woman, the gay, the androgynous, and plotted them around the finger. And she said, all of these perspectives are right when we look at life. All of these perspectives matter. And that struck me hard. That struck me real hard. See, we were all looking at the same thing. And the real requirement of understanding our communities is not only to acknowledge the diversity of people who live in it, but to come to understand their plight, to know what their walk of life feels like, and gain understanding through kindness and compassion. What we get back is a depth of scope, a deeper understanding of ourselves and our purpose in life, because we've been moved, because we've been jolted out from our fixed position to see life from another right and true perspective. To the women who are the breadwinners of their home or the CEOs of their organizations and feel uncomfortable in that mold, this concept is for you. To know that at any time you can move and the purpose of your life goes unchanged. You can wear the pants one day, you can wear the pants one moment, and a summer dress the next. To the solo dads who are looking to soften their tones and find ways to nurture their daughters, you can go near full mum mode. This concept is for you. If the purpose of raising your daughters, if it adds to the purpose of raising your daughters, and then slip back into Footy Friday with the brothers. To the gay men looking for understanding in a world that often condemns how you want to live and love, this concept is for you, as the space to really enjoy life expands in our community. Sitting in that room listening to Joanne speak, I couldn't help but feel like less of a man, and what a beautiful experience that was. I was there with these brilliant women for the next month, and to find out that some identified completely as two-spirited, some were queer, and one was contrary. We came from Norway, Samoa, New Zealand, North America, Jamaica, and all of us were being pushed to see life with a new lens. And we developed a binding vulnerability, a courage that seemed to run beneath gender or even culture. And it was here that I experienced my first reprieve from the manhood I'd known all my life. And I was able to complete a poem I'd been working on for White Ribbon for quite some time. Joanne's husband, Jerry, he said that as Indigenous storytellers, we speak for the deities. At first, my mind went to the elements, to the trees, the ocean, the sky, the earth. But then I realized sometimes the deities are much closer to us. Sometimes they are living within us. And with a scope that set me closer to womanhood, I was able to write this poem for the strengthening spirit of women, but more specifically, for the strengthened spirit of my mum. This poem is called For Her. Men, unless we learn to converse, to traverse the trauma, there will be no change, No photosynthetic awakening of the stem that binds us as men to be is to pollinate a sweeter touch, is to count the importance of our counterparts like the sun up. She sums up our broken parts too often. She once lit up the corners we'd backed ourselves into like a window in a concrete cell, like rewriting the chains that have made concrete of ourselves, and ocean tide wearing at our polypeptides. Love, love, love lived here once, wrote a song in our DNA. See, a man's clefs are silent without her bass, but together they are a bass clef signed on a stave that runs down the page like a pathway or ladder to heal us. And the bad strand in our double helix is just a shadow of the other, and shadows constrict like snakes eventually until we have forgotten how good it feels to be found, to have someone seek out the better man in all of us. A good woman, any woman, will navigate the caves unknown bends, arrive at our dead ends, ready and willing to ascend even at the mouth of the lion's den, but she won't stay to be slaughtered. So don't try to make her stay. Kiss her deeply at the surface after you've found your way. Courage is a mere acronym. Save our souls, ascribed inflection in our son's eyes, a stiffened gaze, a generation of observers growing up blind. And if mothers fall to the chopping of blunt axe knuckles in a home where nobody else sees or hears, then did it really happen? And you, yes, you know the rest. Young boys are growing up both blind and tone deaf, sending out signals of distress to a sky that speaks back, but as a whisper amongst screams that as a man he won't even hear. And tears scorch hieroglyphics written into his eyelids, and he asks me, brother, how do I translate any of this? When he is choking on the smoke from the fire lit in his belly, mouth is a salivating succession of lava, fist a sedentary rock, ready to cut through skin like scissors to paper, and he will not stop, but men, we have to stop, men. We have to speak, to combine our voices, to unearth new landscapes, find a horizon of new choices, to love like we do our daughters before we are fathers. And silent bystanders remind me of empty ballot boxes where new flags are nothing more than cotton wool bandages to ancient pains. I'd rather flagpoles adorned in white ribbon like the riders who course the veins of this country to the hearts of men who need reviving. White ribbon riders, I'm a white ribbon rider, free of his own perpetrations. I said free of his own perpetrations, having conversations with the mirror I see in other men, willing to speak, willing to grow, willing to change for her, for him, for her, for her, for her, for her. The one who lay down in our crawl space and embraced the dark, whose beacon is a pulsing spark, a star that bursts for us, deserving of a new universe. Is it cool if we start that again? All good.
I do not ask for love from you, but only kindness.
But only kindness.
But only kindness.
For I have drunk of passion's cup and found no happiness.
And found no happiness.
I long to feel the gentle touch of hands that stroke my hair.
Hands that stroke my hair, as one will soothe a weeping child.
As one will soothe a weeping
As
child.
one will soothe a weeping child entrusted to his care. It is not much to ask of you, but would you grant me this?
Would you grant me this?
Would you grant me this? A
One
moment of compassion snatched out of a dark abyss.
These are the voices of my daughter, sister, and mother, reading a poem written by my grandmother over 50 years ago. It highlights the intergenerational nature of carrying stories and contains a message of kindness and compassion, two necessity virtues that keep me safe in Banff and still do today. I hope they can do the same for you. As a late bloomer in Te Ao Māori, heavily influenced by my daughter who is fluent in Te Reo and has this incredible way of seeing the world, much like the sociological imagination, she naturally possesses an Indigenous lens. As social workers, as youth workers, as Māori liaisons with whānau, as managers, as regional nurses, CEOs, this lens is vital for working with people. And how my daughter views the world looks a little bit like this. So I'm going to ask for 10 volunteers, but if nobody's keen, I'll try not to point with my fingers. Alright, so 10 volunteers, I need 10 volunteers. There you go. Cool. So why don't we just take this whole table right here? Don't worry, it's not going to be anything crazy. I literally just need you to stand and look amazing. Cool, how many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Cool, 9 will do. Alright, so I just need you to line up at the front of the stage. And I know people don't like admitting their age, so I'm arbitrarily just going to give you ages. Beautiful. Okay, so at this end we have 5 and 10. The ages 5 and 10. Here we have the ages 16 and 25. Here we have the ages 36 and 42. Here we're moving into 50 and 55. And down this end we have 73 and 80. So a few years ago I was fortunate enough to see this exercise at a workshop I attended in the Waikato firsthand. The kuia who ran the workshop had wisdom oozing out of her. She carried her taonga in her hand and it swung from the end of a rope as if constantly interpreting the energy in the room. And this particular exercise, again, stuck. I give the credit to this kuia who passed us on. She called this plane paimana, a happy duality and balance. So if you're down this end and you're 5 and 10, which way is the future? You feel free to point, yep. Oh, sorry, in terms of this line, which way is the future? Oh, I won't give you a clip. Okay, and for you, 16 and 20, which way is the future?
Both.
Oh, okay, now you're trying to get well ahead of me there. But yeah, so which way would you say the future is generally? Nice. And if you're 25 and 36, which way is the future? Nice. So people are already kind of really cottoning on here. And so if you're down this end and you're 80 and 73, which way might the past be? This way? Cool. And which way might the future be?
That way.
So this is the key of what an Indigenous lens is all about, yeah? Is that in this equalized, stabilized state, when we look at age, when we look at intergenerational, when we apply an intergenerational lens, this is what it looks like. It doesn't start and end, it's infinite. What becomes the past becomes the future, what becomes the future becomes the past. Our older people, they see the future down this end. Our ancestors see the future in their descendants. And if you're in the middle, well then you get kind of mixed up. Because that's where the happy collision happens. That's where those two worlds combine, and they actually combine in each of us. Awesome, thank you. Give everyone a hand. Yeah, so this is how an Indigenous lens works, and it's something we all have if we dig deep enough for it. Here is where all matter of imagination and reality collide, and this intergenerational plateau is a small snapshot of how my daughter sees the world. I say snapshot because this model is actually infinite. And if we're not looking at the lives of the people we're helping with this scope with an Indigenous lens, then we aren't giving ourselves the best opportunity to help them. In the words of the prophetic Maya Angelou, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. This next part is called Insight. And this is a story from my past. I was 23 years old, Having just returned from Australia after a failed attempt at a rugby league career, due to rheumatoid arthritis that spread through my entire body. The seizing of mobility and pain drew me into an extremely dark depression. Although at the time I was so young and cocky that I didn't really know what that meant. And so I pushed through and decided to continue on with life. I began a social science degree at university, and I began working as a youth support worker at a residence called Te Hurihanga, or the Turning Point. There I worked with young men who were described as the worst criminal offenders in the region. What a terrible name, what a terrible label, and what a terrible burden to carry. Working there would become such a garden of growth for me personally, because when I looked at those young men, all I saw were my homies from the hood and where I grew up. And not long after, I realized I was looking at a version of my young self that escaped their predicament simply by not being caught doing crime. The entire time I worked there, I never read one file. I met each of those young men face value, and our relationship developed from scratch. Obviously, I'm not advocating for that. You could say it was an unsafe practice, but it did allow me to operate without any preconceived ideas. And my 23-year-old spidey senses felt like they deserved it, because someone gave me that opportunity as a young man. Excuse me. Yeah, because a handful of people had given me that opportunity as a young man. And while I worked there, I was constantly reviewing my own teenagehood. I was still so close to it. That process of reviewing my teenagehood is the beauty of insight, of looking inward. Because it meant when I looked outward at them, I felt it. When their parents didn't show up for graduation. I saw when they were afraid on the first day of coming into the house. And I heard the depth of their laughter when I cracked a joke I probably shouldn't have. And they were all brilliant. Some could fight, yeah. And if that skill were fine-tuned and focused, we might be praising their skill in the UFC right now, like we do. Some were incredibly creative and ocean floor deep, and would carve master stories into wood. And some were outright crack-up, hilarious, cool as ice clowns. And that's how I saw them. That's who they were. And they kept me, and because of that, they kept me well. Because to work with them, I had to check in with my younger self, who hadn't dealt with the loss of footy. I punished who I punished for that. They reminded me to treat him well. I'd cry for my younger self because I'd stopped seeing the beauty in it when we didn't deliver on an NRL contract to help my family out of poverty. Working with those young men heightened my insight. It kept me busy going in for growth so that I could literally help. And I cherished working with those boys who I called by their names and not their rap sheets. This poem is called Youth Worker, and I wrote it for them. Young boys, I promise you it's okay to love and be loved. You with your turmoil, with your scars, your lacerations, not of thigh or wrist, but of feet and standing, of breath and breathing, of tempers, temptation. You who arrived as boys knocking at the skin of yourselves like an overused joke, hoping the reply on the other side would one day be man. Man who? Just man you. Who believed you were descendant of your parents' flaws, who carved mask persona into cell walls and dairy doors as if to say the child that never was is no more. I live by my street name. I live by my street name. You, the poor, and sometimes the rich, know that I never read your files. I met you behind the ribcage gates when you said I was welcome to listen to your symphony, beating beats unique to a life humbled by defeat, repair, repeat, a cyclic history cultivated in struggle. You, clad with ceramic muscle compacted from broken foundations and circular rotations, overcome by hustle or become the ride. Sam, when we arrived at the foot of your house, the outcome of an affluent upbringing of wealth, I felt ignorant perceptions ring my sensibilities. Words crash behind enamel walls like rich kid problems don't exist at all. But your suffering, your dread, read even in the scuff of your Nike sandal on approaches. This palace stared down on your misfortune like a criminal inspection, like a father vicariously expecting to see his dreams of perfection in you, Nate. The first time you had money in the shop was also the first time you got kicked out, was also the first time you invited me inward, told me your parents had been drinking for days, your little sister was starving, so you stole bread, opened a space inside your red threads and said, look, see my cracks, brother, I see all your cracks. They magnify as if staring into a bottomless chasm. They echo the irregular spasms of weary heart patterns, too old for your soul, too heavy for your bones. I see it in the way you dip and slide your step. I see it kill the aged bones in your fingers to crooked finger rep, things you will never fully understand. There is so much more you could be doing with your hands, young boys. The protection of self is not found in becoming a weapon. Your manhood is not found in multiple young girl undressing. It starts with doors, fixed into the cracks of you. Built from hope and faith as we collaborate. See, my job, my passion is to build skyscrapers inside those doors. So that when the man in you arrives, he can reside on the top floor, on the surface of your face where your potential resides. Breathe, young boys, stand, young boys, because I want you to run. I want you to run like a minefield of neurons bursting into reaching arms, fingers splayed, the moment before they steal their dreams from an arrow piercing that finally strikes the moon. Be more than a man. Make sure you're a good one. Whose steps send a dusty plumage of self-esteem into the air, smouldering enough to smoke out ego's breath as misguided perceptions of masculinity take their hooks out of your chest. Be free, be free, be free of the mistakes of all the men before you. Be better than a sedentary pair of legs. Run, I said, like your skin replied mountain echoes from the inside. Man, 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 man. Stand, step, walk, run. Your slate is clean. Your time here is done. This last part is called Hindsight and Foresight. This is my last story before we get kind of sifting for some gold. Let's travel back to Canada. Reposition ourselves within the hugging mountain range of the sleeping buffalo. The grandmother energy is high, and I am sitting in one of the black spot theatres of the arts campus where I was doing the residency. I'm listening to the incredible Michelle Thrush, an indigenous actor from Calgary, speaking, but my mind is full of noise, and I'm struggling to pay attention. So what's the best therapy for a busy mind? For feeling too much and having too many thoughts raging in your head? So I take a photo from my library on my phone and I post to Instagram with this somber caption. Unworthy, feeling deeply today, inadequacy spiraling into feelings of being unworthy. Unworthy of holding spirit and accessing my tipuna. Unworthy of channeling and manifesting, unworthy of creativity, unworthy of knowledge and unworthy to speak. Life, living, loving all become very hard, and I fall out of love with myself often and so easily. It's a hard way to be. So many parts of who I am or have been reflecting, and all of it terrifies me. As if the world could spin and I'd be on the other side of the mirror. I think of my daughters, and I'm overcome by guilt. If I'm this far away for 3 weeks and create nothing, that serves their health and serves their future in reality, then what have I come here for? Will I suffer? Yeah. Will I get through this? Yeah. I'm not sure why, but I ride the wave as it comes. Everyone back home, you've done so much for me to be here. And despite the storm raging inside, like all storms, this will pass. Heart emoji. As you can see, I was super emotional. I struggled through the theatre workshop, but I did shine in one workshop where we were animals crawling on the floor. I was unsettled and I couldn't put my finger on it until Michelle came back out to present her show called Inner Elder. She was gripping and embodied her characters in a way that shook me out of my head. She played a mixture of roles, from characters based on her younger self to the character she called Grandma Kuku, who was loosely based on her own grandmother. Her ability to bounce from character to character, yet maintain this playful innocence, cheeky grin, and quick-wittedness through what was actually a traumatic upbringing, sat very close to home with me. And then she got to Grandma Kuku. Throughout the show, she'd been adding articles of clothing that aged her without detection. Finally, she rubs flour into her hair, and all of a sudden, standing before the entire class is an elderly woman. And by this point, I was completely drawn in. Grandma Cookham could do it all. She sung, she danced, she cracked jokes and embarrassed the audience members. And then she too looked into me, her piercing eyes targeting me from the stage floor with unrehearsed intuition. And she asks, "Why do you feel so unworthy today?" As if she could see my Instagram account. Let Grandma Cookham remedy that. Come down and dance with me. And so I did. The show was called Find Your Own Inner Elder, but Michelle used the playfulness of the inner child as well. And she used the intelligence of the inner child's bag of tricks to soften me. She called this the clown spirit. And with it, she created an opening for the wise Grandma Cookham to move me, to literally make me dance. This duality dynamic can be represented in so many ways. Again, we see the fluidity and value of balance, paimana, between adulthood and childhood. When I think about that external from my inner world, then the voice of our young people becomes critical in our communities. The work I've done as a spoken word mentor and youth worker only reminds me of that. If our ancestors hold the stories from the past, then our descendants hold the stories for the future. As a father, I recognized this balance when I became a solo parent of my daughters. The need for me to pour over into femininity, because we are all vessels of both, masculine and feminine. I learned to look into the histories of my grandmothers, to properly understand my mother's plight, my sister's plight, examining my hindsight specific to women, so that I could better parent my daughters. As I said earlier, they teach me what it means to be a man by raising them and learning what they need. I feel lucky that my daughters and I can spend intimate and meaningful time together, because they give me the tools to prepare simply by being themselves. That preparation I call foresight. I see it and I use it because I value their knowledge as right and true. So let's begin sifting through some of those stories and finding some gems. So what does implementing scope look like in the social sector and in the community here in Waikato? To me, the applications are endless, but here are 3 examples. Use scope to equalise your organisations. Paimana, the happy duality, is a plateau where ancestor, descendant, and all living forms exist equally. It does not raise or deepen unless everyone is working with equal capability. CEO to manager to frontline to the families and people we support, there is no hierarchy here. We are all tasked with well-being, and each of us are bound to each other's from the moment we share our stories. Use scope to platform other voices. then a real reflection of our community and the issues can take shape, because the solutions lie with those who carry the burden, because the statistics continue to fail where story won't. There are youth advisories embedded in different youth organisations across the Waikato. Who better to share their stories and speak on their behalf than themselves? Who better to speak about queer issues in the Waikato than Waki? Who better to speak on Māori issues in the Waikato than whānau, Papua and Iwi? If we meet them with pai mana, equalised, so much can happen. Use scope for experience to keep opening your ears, all 6 of them, to the reality we live in. Immerse yourself in new experiences. If you have professional development funds, use them. And try something that challenges you to grow in your role or challenges the mindset of your team. Though you may hold fast to your core beliefs, be open to experiencing others. Learn the language, because not everyone we support believes as we do. They tell our, insight, hindsight, and foresight are essentially our internal scope. They tell us how we connect to ourselves and others. Insight simply means that you are checking in, that you review your memories for purpose and passion in your work, because in this industry, burnout is real. Mental unwellness is real, exhaustion is real, and depression are real, and it can happen to the best of us. We often start out in social work with a burning flame for people within us, but if we're not taking care of it, that flame can die out. Hindsight and foresight remind us that we are not alone in our life experience. We have the constant support of our ancestors and the endless motivation of our descendants. Our inner child is wise, our inner elder is wise. Listen to both. One may soften our approach where it's necessary, bringing a lightheartedness that I found to be vital as a youth worker. And one will sharpen our focus when the work needs to be done. When the reports are due, when the project crashes and needs the level of wisdom that comes like a spark of genius. In the words of Michelle Thrush, around a single blade of grass is 100,000 ancestors willing it to grow. Our old people will often tell a story and never give you a recap. They give you the story and you're left to have that story unfold on you for the rest of your life. I find it to be one of my favourite forms of learning. You've heard a lot of stories today, and a mixture of modes, and I wanted to thank you for being here, for listening, and I offer this seed. All these tools, scope, insight, hindsight, and foresight, are stagnant without a good story. A good story moves you, so tell them. Fill your organisation up with them. Reinvigorate policy or strategy plans with poems. Write bars for the youth worker job description, or songs for the dense paperwork. Bring tone, rhythm, and intonation into your work, and use the endless resource that is story, however you like, to move people. If we hope to strengthen our community through stories, then it starts with the one we tell ourselves, and then the ones we share. Our master MC in local Tuunga asked me once to look at the trees. He said, "What do you see? What do they all have in common?" And being a clever young Māori man, I said, "Well, they're all breathing matua." To which he replied, "No." And he said, that from the moment of germination, when the stalk unfurls and the leaves present themselves, one of those leaves will rise to the top. And it will point upward at the top of the tree like an antenna, gathering information from the metaphysical world that exists around it. And then he said, "You have one on your head." Perhaps that's why you're quite good at metaphors. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you.